Hey, what's up, Mavs fans? Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here on my latest video here on Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to download and subscribe to the Inside The Mavs podcast wherever you get podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And you can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. And make sure you like and comment on this video as well as we get closer to the NBA trade deadline, and things for your Dallas Mavericks continue to heat up as we are just a few days away from the February 8th NBA trade deadline. The Mavericks begin a 3-game East Coast trip as they take on the Philadelphia 76ers, the Brooklyn Nets, and the New York Knicks. So for the Mavericks, an opportunity as they get Kyrie Irving back into the lineup to hopefully start to put together some continuity and chemistry with Luka Doncic. We know that Doncic and Kyrie Irving together, when they played together, are 12-10. Hopefully, you'll see more of that as this team continues to move forward here. But obviously, the trade deadline and the conversation around this team continues to heat up, whether it be conversations that we've already had when it comes to guys like PJ Washington or Kyle Kuzma from the Washington Wizards. There's a lot of things that are starting to take place in terms of talks that we're hearing from various individuals, whether it be Shams Charania of The Athletic, Tim McMahon of the ESPN, Mark Stein of Substack. There are a lot of things that your Mavericks right now seem to be engaged in when it comes to different players around the league. And the newest round of reporting that we're starting to see come through as we're just a few days away from the NBA trade deadline is a very interesting one coming from Mark Stein of Substack, of course, longtime NBA insider, and has covered the Mavericks for a long time as well. In his latest piece, detailing that the Bucks and the Mavericks, league sources are telling him, have had exploratory discussions surrounding a trade that would swap Milwaukee's Bobby Portis Jr. and Dallas Mavericks' Grant Williams. Now, that's interesting because, of course, Williams is in his first season with the Mavericks. Bobby Portis, at 28 years of age, makes $11.7 million this season and has 2 years left on his deal, including a $13.4 million option for 2025, 2026 after this one. And, of course, Grant Williams, 25 years of age in the first year of a 4-year, $53.3 million deal. Now, this is interesting because for Portis, he does add some front line help for your Mavericks. Obviously, for a team that doesn't rebound the basketball well, and the Mavericks are small in the front court, and we've had plenty of discussions about how this team needs to improve its front line. But let's start with the Grant Williams portion of this. If the Mavericks have to move on from Grant Williams, it will ultimately be one of the most disappointing signings. In fact, probably the most disappointing acquisition so far in the Nico Harrison era. When Grant Williams was brought to this team, he was thought to be a guy that could provide you three-point shooting, could guard multiple positions. And through the first month or so of the season, it seemed like he was going to be bringing those things. In fact, shooting 50% from the three-point line. But things since the first month of the season have particularly gone south. He's been inconsistent from the three-point line, has not played well on the defensive end, given the reputation that he had coming from Boston, and has not fit well based off of what his skill set is supposed to be for this team. And for the Mavericks, who are in a position where they had to see their defense get better, it's simply gotten worse since the arrival of Grant Williams, which is not what you expected from him coming from Boston. And we thought with the match that he had in terms of sharing an agency with Luka Doncic, there would be some chemistry that would be able to be developed there. He lost his starting spot in the rotation as guys like Dante Exum and Derrick Jones Jr. continue to play well and ascended into the starting lineup, relegating Grant Williams to the bench, and he's never really recovered since then. So if you have to move on, if you're the Mavericks, that is a really disappointing signing. As I mentioned, the most disappointing acquisition in the Nico Harrison era. Now to Portis Jr., a guy at 28 years of age, and you start to look at what he's done, especially over the last few games. We'll look at his last 5 games, for example, averaging over 27 minutes per game, 16 points per game, shooting 47% from the field, but also shooting 39% from 3 on volume with nearly 5 attempts per game. But most importantly, he's giving you 8 rebounds per game over his last 5 games. If you go over his last 10, it's about the same, 7 rebounds per game, averaging nearly 13 points per game while shooting 38% from 3, while shooting 47.5% from the field. So you get my drift here. While Bobby Portis may not be the answer that you're looking for, he may be a better option right now. And right now, based off of what he's making, a cheaper one than what you're getting from Grant Williams, even with him being 3 years older than Williams right now. And if you're the Mavericks, that may be a shrewd move to make, especially you get Grant Williams out of the Western Conference, you send him back to the East, and you acquire a guy in Bobby Portis Jr., who we've heard in the past that the Mavericks have had interest in when it comes to free agency. But all of this would be surrounding the disappointment that Williams has been so far this season. I detailed it a little bit earlier on this season about whether or not Williams had been the biggest disappointment in the NBA as far as an acquisition is concerned. And unfortunately, it has not gotten really that much better since we had that conversation. And now we're to the point where there are league sources telling Mark Stein that, hey, the Mavericks may be looking to move on from Grant Williams. So that in and of itself, a bit of a mild surprise, but at the same time, if you've been paying attention and watching how this team has played, especially the way that Grant Williams has played so far this year, it doesn't necessarily come as a surprise given the fact that he may be moved during the NBA trade deadline. So that one is one to definitely keep an eye on as we get just a few days away from the trade deadline. Then the heating up of Andrew Wiggins around this team continues to grow as well. Individuals like Tim McMahon and Shams Charania both have said that the Mavericks are interested in Andrew Wiggins. Now, the thing with Wiggins is a couple of years ago, you remember how he was able to play against the Dallas Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals and how good he was in that NBA title run for the Warriors a couple of years ago. Really hasn't been the same player since then. But you've seen over the last several games now where he's had an opportunity to play alongside Jonathan Kuminga, things are looking a little bit better for him with Draymond Green back in the lineup as well. So the Warriors may be in a spot where they feel like they have unlocked some things when it comes to Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins, but at the same time, his contract, which we thought a couple of years ago, when he signed the contract, I should say, felt like it was a pretty good deal at the time for the Warriors, and it simply has not been that for them given the decline in play that you've seen from him. Let's look at Wiggins' contract situation based on what he has right now for the Golden State Warriors and what you may feel like you may want to do with him. Of course, right now, he's in the middle of a 4-year, $109 million deal, making $24 million this year. He'll make 26 next season and then 28 after that with a player option in the 26-27 season when he'll be 31 years of age. And with the declining value of Wiggins, what are you willing to move on from? And are the Warriors in a position to accept what you may have to offer to trade to move on from Andrew Wiggins? And I don't know if the Warriors are necessarily in that spot to do that because they've got several decisions to make when it comes to not only Andrew Wiggins, but Chris Paul, Klay Thompson is going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year as well. And whether or not, if you feel like moving on from Wiggins is the right thing to do right now, given his declining play, are the Mavericks the team that has the kind of pieces, whether it be a young asset in guys like Jaden Hardy or young pieces like Josh Green as well, or if you're looking at contracts like a Rashawn Holmes, who has a player option at the end of the season, Maxey Kleber, who's making $11-12 million this year as well. What does that look like in terms of the return if you're the Golden State Warriors? So there's interesting news and bits when it comes to that. And for Wiggins as a player, let's look at what he's been doing over the last several games as far as the Warriors concerned to give you a better idea of what Wiggins has been doing. Let's go for his last 5 games, averaging nearly 15 points per game, shooting 59% from the field and nearly 54% from 3. And that's only on 3 attempts per game based off of what he's doing. But he's also giving you nearly a steal and a half and a block and a half per game, playing 32 minutes a night. Let's take it over his last 10 games. 13 points per game, shooting 49% from the field, 35.5% from 3. Again, not on a lot of volume at 3 attempts per game. Wiggins not necessarily a great three-point shooter, but does shoot the ball well from the free throw line at nearly 83%, and he's giving you nearly 4 rebounds a night as well. So there are things, especially from a defensive side, if you feel like you can be the guy, Jason Kidd, to motivate Andrew Wiggins to be able to get the best out of him the way that he was playing a couple of years ago, maybe that's a move that you make. And we've heard from Tim McMahon of ESPN that the Mavericks may be in a position where they're looking, of course, at all possibilities that they may want to take on the risk of trying to revitalize Andrew Wiggins' career. So the opportunity to possibly buy low on a player like Wiggins, who unfortunately has seen a decline in his play, maybe you could take advantage of that based on what he can bring to you if you are able to get the most out of him alongside Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. So, two interesting propositions here if you're the Mavericks based off of what you need right now. And what are the two things that the Mavericks need? They need frontline help, a guy that's 6'7, 6'8, who can guard multiple positions, can knock down threes, and also guard on the defensive end. They also need front court help as well in terms of additional rebounding and defensive presence to be able to bolster that front line that's extremely thin, especially when Derek Lively is not able to play, as he'll be missing another game against Philadelphia with a broken nose, and we'll see what his status is continuing to move forward as well. So there are things that the Mavericks need to improve upon. There are options that are out there, but with limited assets to be able to make those things happen. And if you're the Mavericks, what kind of risk are you willing to take, especially if you're not going to be in the Kyle Kuzma sweepstakes, which is starting to look more and more like they will be out of based on the fact that the Washington Wizards right now have all the leverage. Washington looks at Kuzma as a guy on the right side of 30 with a descending contract that does a lot of the things well that they enjoy him doing, even on a bad basketball team. And if you're Washington, you can afford to wait to move Kuzma, especially this summer, when you may be able to get that much more out of him instead of having to be forced to move him based on any pressure that a team may be putting on you unless you get the offer that you want. So if you're Washington, you may sit pat with Kyle Kuzma. We've talked about PJ Washington as well. Another option that you are the Mavericks could be on the lower end based off of what his skill set brings and the length and size that he provides in terms of a scorer and a rebounder on your front line. So if you're looking at options right now, whether it's PJ Washington, Andrew Wiggins, now the aforementioned Bobby Portis from the Milwaukee Bucks, the Mavericks have a decision to make, and over the next few days, it's going to be fun to see what they decide to do and how creative that they get. We've seen now 7 of the last 8 years that they've made a deadline deal to be able to have things moved for their team to get better, theoretically. Even Nico Harrison in his first couple of years has made moves, obviously, with the Kristaps Porzingis trade, but also the Kyrie Irving trade, which we celebrate as we record this video right now. So more importantly now, the Mavericks do have some options, but are they in position based on what they have available to them from a draft capital standpoint? Obviously, thinking about the contracts that they already have and going to need to move in order to make things happen. Can they make it happen and move forward at the NBA trade deadline? Because this team is in a position where they need to make a move. If you go read Brad Townsend's latest piece from the Dallas Morning News, a scathing piece detailing what the Mavericks have and have not been able to do and what needs to happen moving forward based on the partnership of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving needing to be the thing that drives this team moving forward and what needs to be surrounding them to help this team be better through the rest of the season. As we're about to be past the 50-game mark, time is in essence starting to run out. The Mavericks feel like they can be a top 6 team in the West, but they've got to put it together starting now, and that may mean a move at the trade deadline to do it. But all these things are heating up, it seems like, quite quickly for the Mavericks, with that surprise one with Milwaukee and Dallas possibly swapping Bobby Portis Jr. and Grant Williams in a NBA trade deadline deal. We'll see if it ultimately comes to fruition, but no shortage of talk, and we'll detail it all right here on Kevin Gray Sports when it comes to being inside the Mavs. Again, make sure you like and comment on this video. Make sure you also follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube and download the Inside the Mavs podcast, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak, wherever you get your podcast. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And keep up with me as I'm your Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak. Until next time, I'll talk to you later. Peace.